Hello and welcome. Today I will be talking about accommodation. My name is Megan Evans and I am a third year theatre and professional practice student at the University of Bedfordshire. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the types of accommodation. When looking at the University of Bedfordshire in particular, there is university-owned accommodation, private-owned accommodation, and then student rental accommodation, also known as student houses. Both the university-owned and private-owned accommodation are on campus. And now, for some universities, this might not be the case. A lot of university-owned accommodation might not be on campus, but for University of Bedfordshire in particular, ours are on campus, and this makes it very convenient because you don't have to rush to get to your lessons. The university-owned accommodation is cheaper of the two. However, you do have to share a toilet and a bath/shower with other students. It is usually 2 toilets between 9 students, which if that does not bother you, then you're saving roughly £30 to £40 a week, which adds up to become quite a lot. The private-owned accommodation is more expensive, but the facilities are a lot more well kept. There is 24-hour security, and you do get a toilet and shower to yourself. So there are pros and cons to each, and it just depends on, what kind of person you are, if you can live a little bit, less fancy, if that makes sense, with university-owned accommodation, but then save more money, or if you want to live a little bit fancier and live in private-owned accommodation on the university campus. And when I say private-owned accommodation, for this one in particular, it is a partnership with the university, so they still have links with the university. With both accommodations, you have to share a kitchen and living room, and it is your responsibility to keep it clean. So it's usually, it depends on the university. It can be anywhere between 3 to 6 people you're sharing a kitchen with. But then, it's up to you whether you interact with these people, and it's up to you to keep it clean. They do have cleaners to usually keep the rest of the facility clean, like the common spaces and the hallways, but it's up to you to keep your kitchen and bedroom clean. Then you have student rental accommodation, so better known as student houses. This is when you and anywhere between 2 to 4 other tenants rent a house. They are listed as student houses and are a lot cheaper than normal houses. So the benefits of accommodation, the pros to living in student accommodation. One of the key benefits of living in student accommodation is the opportunity to make new friends. When first going to university, everyone is in the same boat. You all go to university most of the time with no friends, which can be quite nerve-wracking. However, by staying in accommodation, you are instantly introduced to a couple, 4 usually other people who are sharing the same kitchen/living space with you. There are many other ways to make friends, but living in accommodation is one of the main ones. Also, some accommodations, like the private-owned accommodation, have spaces called common rooms, which again is a shared space where you can make new friends. So each common room is different, but usually they have something like a pool table or a tennis table, something like that in there for you to go and play or spend leisurely and interact with new people. And with the kitchen spaces, you go in there, everyone wants to make new friends. You might have someone who might teach you how to cook, things like that. It's a good way to make new friends. One of the other benefits of accommodation is the chance to become more mature and independent. Moving away from home now means that you have to do things like cooking, cleaning, doing your own laundry, making sure all the spaces are clean. So it gives you a chance, to sort of test out adulthood, if that makes sense. So you get to do all these things yourself, but you're not alone. There are people there to help you and support you. Overall, accommodation is a good chance for you to learn new skills, make new friends, and it is all part of the university experience. And I enjoyed every minute of living in student accommodation, both the private university-owned one and the student rental accommodation. So personally, myself, I spent 2 years in the private-owned accommodation and then 1 year in a student rental accommodation, so a student house. And the only reason I moved to a student house in particular was just to save a little bit more money in my third year. But other than that, I really enjoyed the private owned accommodation and made lots of new friends that way. Now, whenever there's a benefit, there's usually a con. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the cons of accommodation. So sometimes you might get homesick, and this is the case whenever you move out of home for the first time. But with that there's a lot of new people there to support you. They set up systems at university for those who are homesick, so there is always someone to talk to. So don't worry about it too much. Everyone is also experiencing this feeling of missing home. If you aren't used to looking after yourself, you might find it difficult at first, and that's what I want to stress on at first. It might be a bit of a challenge learning how to cook, how to clean, how to do your laundry, but it only takes a little bit of time to get used to it. And if you can't get used to it, there are also, think of these flatmates that you all have. You might come to an agreement that one flatmate might do all the cooking if cooking is their expertise, and you might do the dishes if you're good at washing up, and someone else might hoover. So you might come up with this shared living arrangement, or you might learn to do it all yourself. So there are ways to conquer that fear of it all being difficult at the beginning. Another one, and this might be the most off-putting one, is you might not get on with your flatmates, but this isn't the end of the world. You're all adults, so if there are any problems, it's very natural just to sit down and talk it out. If you go to sleep at 11 p.m. but you have a flatmate who's blasting music at 1 a.m, then it's up to you to be an adult, to sit down, to talk to them and say, look, I like to go to sleep at 11. Would you mind, toning your music down at that time? And most cases, they come to an agreement. And when there isn't a case like this, then you can go to the people who own the facilities and they will help you out. So there's always, again, one thing I'd like to stress with university is there's so many different support systems to help you out, so you are not alone. And lastly, depending on your maintenance loan and the cost of accommodation, you might struggle with budgeting. Now, a maintenance loan, just in case you don't know, is the loan you get given from student finance to help support your living allowance. And for most cases, a lot of people don't struggle with this, but you might, depending on the cost of the accommodation you choose to stay at. So, it's thinking about in advance, how much should I spend on this? How much should I spend on that? So it's becoming an adult and rationalizing your money. And it might just be that you might have to miss one trip out for a meal or things like that. So it's not necessarily a massive con. Next, do you have to live in accommodation? And if you do you miss out on much? A lot of people worry that if they don't stay at student accommodation, then they might miss out. And if your university is located near or in your hometown, then no, you don't have to live in accommodation. There is no rule saying that you have to live in accommodation. I mean, even if you live 2 hours away and you really don't want to live in accommodation, you can commute and travel that way. It's up to you. It's your responsibility. Although I would, in them cases, recommend accommodation. Otherwise, there's the cost of commuting and the stress of getting there every day and things like that. And missing out. Now, I wouldn't say you necessarily miss out on loads by not staying at the university's accommodation, but it may make social outings and occasions a little bit more difficult rather than, easy, if that makes sense. So you might all decide to go to the university's restaurant or something like that, and you might have to go home at 6 because of a bus or because of how you get home, but the rest of your friends might stay longer. It's things like that. So it's not necessarily missing out, but there might be circumstances that come across a little bit more difficult. So it's them things to take into account. Overall, I found living in accommodation one of the best experiences of my university time, and it really did help me mature and grow. I learned how to cook properly, I learned how to do laundry, and now moving on from university, I can confidently go and live on my own and be confident with the skills that I've taken from living in student accommodation. Thank you for watching the presentation. Please ask any questions you may have in the chat box and we will be happy to answer. Again, thank you.